Good morning. My name is Tom Hartmann with the Hartmann Law Firm in Watchung, New Jersey. Today I want to talk to you about what are called business non-competes or commercial non-competes, as opposed to personal non-competes one might sign when one enters into an employment agreement. In a business non-compete or a commercial non-compete, somebody is selling their business to another party, seller and buyer. The buyer is buying the company but doesn't want the old person to compete with them. In other words, the seller has built up a company over decades, 10, 20, 30 years, has a great reputation in the industry, knows everybody in the industry, has plenty of customers, and is substantial in the business. And that's what the new buyer is buying. So the buyer says, I'm glad to buy this from you, say $10 million, $20 million, but you can't compete with me after I sell it to you, after I buy it from you. In other words, I buy it from you and then you go out and start another business. I've destroyed the value of my investment. So you have to agree with me as part of the investment that you won't compete with me. Now it's a common practice, but the details of it are very important because oftentimes the non-compete is 2 or 3 pages long. And if the buyer is smart, the buyer will attach a lot of money to the non-compete. Say the business is worth $20 million. And the buyer says, okay, I'll pay you $20 million, but $2 million of that is going to be assigned to the non-compete. Meaning I'm paying you 10% of the value of this business so that you won't compete with me. And I'm going to pay you over time, installments. So if the non-compete goes for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I'm going to pay you over that period. Now that's a very important thing to the buyer and to the seller. The buyer uses that to make sure that the seller obeys the non-compete. Now put yourself in the position of the seller. When you're the seller, you think, okay, no problem. Give me my $20 million, assign $2 million of it to the non-compete. I don't care because I'm leaving this business. I'm going to retire. I've made plenty of money. And then 3 or 4 or 5 months into it, the seller gets bored and says, I miss all my friends. I miss getting up in the morning. I miss doing something. And so you start to nibble at the edges a little bit. And then people start to call you. And they want to ask you for your advice about that business area. And you give it. That's probably a violation of the non-compete. Customers say, I'm not as happy as I used to be with this person. Can you give me, with the person who bought the company, can you give me any advice on what I can do? You may be violating the non-compete. Employees may call you and say, can you help me find a job? I'm not happy anymore. You may be violating the non-compete. Keep that in mind. Read that thing very carefully because the likelihood of your getting out of a business as the seller that you built up for 10 or 20 or 30 years and never going back to it is slim. You'll want to go back. You'll want to help people. You'll want to help your old employees. You'll consider them family. You'll want to help your customers. But they're not your customers anymore. They're not your employees anymore, and you must be very careful. And that brings up the last point I want to make on this videotape, and that is how long is that non-compete? The buyer will want to make it as long as possible. Sometimes they're 10 years long. That's way too long. The world changes immensely in 10 years. The world changes dramatically in 5 years. Do your best to keep those non-competes to no more than 3 years. After 3 years, the world of business has changed in any case. It shouldn't be necessary for there to be a non-compete longer than that. Customers get used to the buyer, employees do, etc. Providers of services do. There's no reason for it to go more than 3 years if you're the seller. If it goes to 5 years and 10 years, what's going to happen is those installment payments are going to be used to hurt you. They're going to find out that you talked to somebody on the phone or that you gave advice or that you were nibbling at the edge, or that you were thinking about starting the business, or that you were talking to customers, or you were guiding customers to other places maybe. And they're going to stop your payments. And then you won't have any of that money from the non-compete, and you will have litigation. Endless litigation, because proving or disproving a non-compete is very difficult. So when you go into a business non-compete, be very careful about it. Read it very, very carefully. Understand its words, understand its implications, and think a year or 2 down the road about where you will be with your life. In other installments, we will talk about other aspects of a business sale. This is the Hartmann Law Firm in Watchung, New Jersey. If we can help you in any way, please call.